So welcome to the welcome to the Node.js Node API team meeting for February 26, 2021. We'll follow our standard approach of looking at the issues that we've got tagged for milestone 11 in the API stable node repo. So I'm going to find those and then I will share my screen with that. Okay. So the first one is related to renaming to Node API. I think, Jim, you've been doing some work on that front recently.
Yes, I have a PR open on ABI stable node. And I've received comments both from Legendicast and Nicola that I should shadow the badge images. So we have a set of badge images.
Right.
Last week we had talked about not renaming them.
Yep.
But the suggestion is that we create a shadow set in the same directory that are not named an API, but Node API.
Right. And then as we move forward, we would add those
Yes.
Node API ones. Yeah. No, that's a good suggestions for sure.
Okay. Okay. So I'll do that today.
Okay. So that's good. Then that looks like moving along nicely. And I think in terms of the checklist you had there, you're working through quite a few of the
I have not
things,
yet.
Right.
Yeah. My next step is to start working through those build tools.
Okay, no, that's good. So it seems like we're making good progress on that front. Anything else we should talk about on that one?
I don't have anything else.
What do you think if do we need to communicate this change? No, do we need to write a blog post, for example? I don't know. So just to say from now on, an API will be called Node API.
Right.
And so, yeah, to keep everyone updated about this, to avoid confusion, because maybe someone could think that Node API is another API.
Right.
But say, and we just rename it to follow our policy.
Yeah, that's probably a good idea. To write, just something explaining that, hey, we're doing this, and it shouldn't really be breaking for anybody, but here's the explanation.
Maybe it's the last task that we need to do.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Maybe a short. I'm sorry, Nicola, I interrupted.
We can start thinking about this. I think, if you agree. Maybe we can open an issue, or maybe I don't know.
Yeah, maybe a brief article on Medium that the foundation could publish.
Yes, okay. Makes sense to me. Don't want to make too big a deal about it or anything, but also, I think there is certainly the chance for confusion. So it'd be nice to have something to point to, I guess, that has the explanation.
Mm-hmm.
So I can create that article if we agreed.
Okay, that would be great, Michael.
Okay, so I'll add that and it'll show up in our list of, here, I'll even go back to here. If I refresh, I'm going to move that up above some of these others so that we remember it. Is that going to work? Okay, I always forget. You can move them around, but why is it? I thought it was this thing.
Yeah.
But it doesn't
That's
seem to be
weird.
moving it. Anyway, we will try and, if anybody can figure out how to move it, just go ahead and move it, right? So
Okay.
might as well not get stalled on that. Any other things related to that that we should talk about?
I don't have anything, Michael.
Okay. Actually, in that one, I thought I had agreed that this doesn't need to be on the agenda. So in the last TSC meeting, we took notes that said I would remove it. So
Okay, I move it.
you what was that? You?
Yeah, I just moved the
Perfect. Okay, thanks. It likes you better than me, so. Okay, so the next issue then is to look at some of the stale issues. And I think it works to look at the oldest ones, although I think this one we might have talked about last time. Just trying to remember the context of this one. Right, so this was around inheritance. I don't think, yeah, I think I just added this to the list, but I think we really, it sounded like from Gabriel's analysis that we needed some work with the engine, but I don't think I certainly haven't looked at it carefully enough to comment or discuss this week. I don't know if anybody else has. If not, I'd suggest we just leave it on there and maybe talk about it next time.
Okay.
Okay, and then let's go back this way.
Yeah, it's fine, and I started working today on this. So
Okay.
I commented just 2 hours ago. So next meeting I will have update about this.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. Let's skip on to the next one. Okay, so this one I think we did discuss last week. We commented, and I don't think there's anything more to do until the original poster admin comments back. Okay, so that's good. Get through the ones that were staled. I think it's nice. Let's just take a quick look. The stale bot, I think, has been helping us in that we're down to a reasonable number of issues, which is great.
Yeah.
Okay. Tracking issues for modules we've noticed are reported. I don't know if there's anything new there. I don't see anything new, but we typically also take a look at NPM. Let's do a quick look of how that's going. So it looks like the trend is still going, a pretty good trend upwards, which is good. I know I haven't looked at external examples or enabled to debug testing for add-ons. So the next two are looking at the issues in the repos. So go ahead.
Come up with a previously stale issue in Node add-on API.
Okay.
I noticed that it's been checked out in the stale issue list, but I've submitted a solution to that. The number is 301.
Okay, let me open that one up.
So it's on right.
Yep.
So currently most of the callbacks in our Node add-on API, it's not being moved. That is to say, this callbacks is being copied so that we cannot capture NAPI reference in those lambdas. So we just make those callbacks being moved around. That is to say, those lambdas not copying them, those lambdas. We can capture reference in those lambdas. So the example of this issue, top of this issue, can work with this work with the solution I just have submitted.
Okay, because I think we closed it last time because we discussed it and said
but it ultimately does show that the reference is not copyable. But since the copying reference on the other thread is just like say it's far too dangerous, and I didn't find out a solution to keep a like say we do a reference counting in Node add-on API. It just far too more burdensome to implement such a generic solution to that. So I just hoping that we can make those APIs exposed by Node add-on API can receive non-copyable lambdas, so that may ease the condition that the developers may face.
Right. Does this potentially break any existing code?
I believe not. The change, I believe it's fully compatible with the previous, since the std move is just a non-OP or on runtime. So there is nothing changed on runtime, but it's changed on the build time to like say we move the finalized callback, and we believe we are not using it in the same scope. So there is nothing changed regarding to the API surface. So I believe it's fully compatible.
Okay, so because it moves it from the current scope to the scope where it can be used. Is that the?
Yeah, it moved from the like say the object at the finalizer, the scope of the object finalizer to the details finalized data. So there is no copy during the construction of finalized data. So that the reference captured by the lambda is not copied to in this condition. So the compiler is satisfied by this runtime non-OP, but they can compile and work like we expected.
Okay, so if you tried to then use it after the move,
the finalized callback will be a empty one, so it will crash on runtime. So we cannot use after move.
Right. So if there was some code that, like, I guess but what you're saying is any code that would have a problem wouldn't have compiled before. Is that right? Like I'm wondering if like there's a case where it used to work, but then it used to work, but now with this change in, it'll actually cause it to crash because you're using it after the move.
I believe no, since previously we cannot we cannot pass a like say a reference captured lambdas to the Node add-on API. So this change does broaden the API surface that previously we not covered yet.
Right.
So
and I guess wouldn't the compiler complain if you try and use it after it's been moved?
Since previously we just not allowing the non-copyable lambdas to be passed in, so it will not compile previous without this change.
Right.
So
But I mean, if
no existing code can get compiled without this change.
right, so that's good. But then I'm wondering if somebody tries to use that finalized callback after it having been moved, since it may not be obvious to them that it's movable, right? Like I could put it in there, it compiles okay, but then I try and use the reference afterwards.
Yeah, for the outer scope, that is to say the finalized callback is being copied into the object at the finalizer. So previously, so for outer scope of the finalized callback, it will not be affected by the change, since the finalized callback is being copied into the scope of object at the finalizer.
But I guess it's being moved as opposed, like, because the old one's no longer good anymore, right?
We just move the copy of add finalizer callback in the add finalizer. So the only one being invalidated is the one being copied into the like say object add finalizer, the one of the callback in this scope, but not the outer scope.
I guess I'm not quite following. Like I'm thinking that either, like the challenge we had is that we don't want to have two copies of the same thing, right? So I think what
Yeah.
this is doing is making it so that we can invalidate the original and then have the new one in the new scope, right?
So the outer scope have to give up the ownership of the lambdas to get the reference captured lambdas to be acceptable by the node add-on API surface.
Right.
So I believe it's totally okay, since the developer has to explicitly opt in with the STD if their callback is not in place initialized.
Right, but I guess we're opting in for them is what I'm trying to understand. They've called that finalizer. They may not know that that's effectively done the STD move for them.
I believe the compilers will complain on the uniqueness that since that it's not copyable.
Okay, so basically, if they tried to use it later on, they would get some compilation errors, complaints, or whatever.
It will always complains, but if they explicitly use move semantics, then it will compile with the PR. But
right, so it'll now
PR, it will not compile.
Right, it'll now compile. But say, so I see that add finalizer. I call add finalizer, and then I actually try and use finalize callback after that in my code, like in the next line. I've just called add finalizer. In the next line, I try and use finalize callback. Is the compiler going to say, hey, you can no longer do that?
I haven't tested about that, but I believe the compiler will complain about it. I can test it out.
Okay.
So
that would be my only question, is like, as long as the compiler says, hey, you know, you basically allowed this to be moved somewhere else, you shouldn't use it anymore, then I think it's great.
Yeah, I can try that to see if compiler will complain on the use of the move.
Okay, right. That sounds good, because just in, I recently ran across this, I think pretty much the same thing, where I had to like allocate a new reference because of this. So. Okay, sounds good. Anything else you want to add on this one?
And no.
Okay. Right. So let's just look at the node add-on API issues. Any other ones that people want to highlight as ones we should talk about?
I just I don't know if I have discussed the issue on the meeting that there is a crash on the node. I will see the number.
Is it 906 we were talking about an intermittent crash?
It's 912.
912. Okay, this one, right?
Yeah,
yes,
I forgot about if
Yep.
we have discussed on this.
No, we haven't.
So I've seen a lot of crash on, let's say, if we throw a non-object type in JavaScript, or either in the C++ with Node API,
Yep.
the NumPy error will fail to construct a reference on the value, since we can only create a reference on object and the function. So other value will be a fatal error, and the process will crash on this. And this is a totally valid JavaScript examples.
So basically, we can only handle things that derive from object. Is that right?
Actually, we can handle exceptions with all JavaScript values in pure C APIs, but the Node add-on API will create a reference on the caught exceptions, so it will fail on such actions, and it will consider it a fatal action, since there is nothing to do when we fail on error handling routine.
Okay. Oh, I see, because we're... So do you think that's just a case of how we've done that, or is there something like...
I just noticed this behavior in previously we just crashed on teardown of the process teardown, and if we call JavaScript functions on teardown, there is a error, like say there is a exception. It's not a object type, and it just says that we cannot call into JavaScript, so that there is, and the process will crash for the Node add-on API on teardown.
So do we need a NumPy : exception?
I've seen that the Gabriel have bring up a issue that the code error will be released by intermediate handle scope, NumPy handle scope, so that we have to create a reference on them. So either or not, we are creating a new class, like say new class for exceptions. We have to determine that if the exception is a object, we can create a reference on it, or if it's not, we just unable to reference it, and those primitive exceptions will always be a weak reference, and it's unsafe to pass around with native C++ throwing patterns, since there will be a intermediate hand scope will got the NOP value and release it with the hand scope. I'm not sure if the engine implementation will actually release the primitive value on no reference on the hand scope teardown. But
So when we're talking primitive references, you mean like an integer or?
Let's say we create a reference on string.
Okay. So like, but also like, can you also just say throw 1 as an integer?
Yeah, right. Any JavaScript value, and including undefined.
Right. Right. And we can't create. So what we've got doesn't let us create references to any Node API value, just those which are objects.
Yeah, but the primitive values, they are not always encoded into the local handles. Like say a dynamically concatenated string, they will be released as, or the heap will explode with a out of memory. So if we are not able to reference those, like say a dynamically constructed string, we are not able to pass it around with C++ native exceptions.
Right. So it's that we create, yeah, okay. So we get a NAPI value, but that NAPI value is not something we can add a reference to keep it. Well, we should be able to keep alive any NAPI node NAPI value, right?
The issue Gabriel just brought up is about the chocolate core, and I've been using JavaScript previous days, and Gabriel, the strings have be able to be referenced, since, or there will be a hard development, like say we cannot reference the dynamically constructed string, and we just unable, or we can create a temporary object, and this object will hold those primitives. It's just a burdensome to if the engine not support. But
right. I guess I'm not fully following, because like anything that we could throw from here ends up getting into the, like I'm looking, sorry, yeah, I'm highlighting that, like from the JavaScript side, anything we throw there should come into us as a NAPI value, right?
Yeah, right.
And unless I'm remembering wrong, like we should be able to create a reference to any NAPI value. Is that, or am I thinking?
I think there is a start in the node implementations.
If I look here and I'm looking at a reference. Like, because I'm just like, say, looking at NAPI create reference takes any value, which, so that doesn't need to be an object.
In the NAPI create reference, there is a check that if the value is not object and or is not a function, it will throw a NAPI object expected state code.
I wonder why we do that.
I will post the link to the chat.
I do know that in V8 only you can only have references to objects like the.
Okay. So that would explain why, I guess, like at the sea level,
So for
some
example, like
reason,
a weak map, you cannot
Yeah.
have keys in a weak map that are strings or numbers or anything like that, because V8 can't add a finalizer to them or something like that.
Okay, so that would make sense. There's some sea level restriction versus anything else.
I believe it's about the if we are using node add-on API without C++ exception enabled, then it's totally safe to putting the exceptions around. But the C++ exceptions, if it's enabled, and the value the JavaScript exception is being thrown, then we are unable to escape it from outer handle scope. So it will be released by the outer handle scope.
Yeah, that I understand. I just didn't get that there was a reason we couldn't create references on any kind of value, which I guess is a JavaScript engine. Yeah, I see the code which checks that. And that's probably based on what Kevin was saying in terms of it's a V8 limitation. I guess, like in that case, is the thing that comes to mind is, can we wrap those in our own object?
Yeah, I believe we can create a temporary object and keep a reference to the temporary object.
Right. Basically make a reference to the value, like create a temporary object and then make that object point to the value.
But when we are throwing this artificial temporary object, we have to unwrap before we actually throwing it back into engine.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's just like say we are just get the error and throwing back to engine. Like say in this case, it will be burdensome to just create another object for it. So I'm not sure if we are going into this path, or if we can figure out if, let's say, escape from the handle scope. I haven't tested about that approach.
Sorry, what was the other approach? Is to,
let's say, escape from the outer scope.
Right, we'd have to pass it. I see what you're saying. Basically, is there any way that we can, exit the scope? But I guess the exceptions are probably just popping them off the stack. So I don't know how we'd have them escape, but that's definitely worth looking at.
Yeah, it's currently about the process, so there will be a possibly denial of service attack on this kind of thing if the code is written and throwing with and possibly arbitrary JavaScript value.
Yeah, it's definitely not okay. But I can only think of like, okay, if we wrap it, or like you said, we do something where it's, if there is some way to escape it, that would be good, but.
Why do we need the reference of the error inside?
Gabriel, the link posted by Gabriel has a full explanation of the intention of.
Okay.
The
I think if I understand it is that like we've gotten this value passed down some number of depths, and the only thing keeping that value alive is the handle scopes on the stack. So as you pop back up the C++, like with the exception, you're basically popping your C++ stack, and so that you could hit a point where somebody created that handle scope, and that's what's keeping it alive. And by the time we get to the point where we're going to like throw it back to, hand it back to the engine, it's no longer referenced and already was cleaned up.
That makes sense.
So we're holding on to it through a strong reference to make sure that until we're done with it, it stays alive.
That makes sense.
yeah, right.
So that's where, like, Cass was mentioning, if there's a way we could actually, like, when you exit a handle scope, like on purpose, there's a way to say, and here's something I want to escape. So if we could use something like that, I just don't know, like, with the C++ automatically popping that, if we're going to have that opportunity or not. But and then the only other way would be like to somehow wrap it. Okay, well, that's definitely an interesting one. It sounds like you've got a few more things to sort of try out before you have a recommendation.
Yeah, I haven't come to a conclusion.
Okay. Anything more we should discuss on that one? No. Okay, let's look at any other issues that are people want to call out. I think I'd like to call out this one, the VS 2013 compiler support. The main thing I want to call our attention to is this document, which I wasn't aware of. So there was another document so our building document is the one I always think about, which is this one. It's master building, and it's the one I've always looked back to say, like, what versions of Node, of the compiler chains and stuff we have to support. But it seems there's this additional one which talks about like what versions you can use to build add-ons with. So even though like 15 you might need to compile with, so if we look at here, it currently says, so I think 15, probably the same for 16 for Windows, says you need to build Node with 2019. This other one says you can build add-ons with 2015. And that's not something I thought about when we were looking at like features we should make sure that we use or don't use in our in Node add-on API. I always thought, like, as long as we were supporting the compiler that was used to build Node, we'd be okay. But this kind of says, no, we should have, we should still be making it so that you can build add-ons with 2015 versus having to move up to 2019. So I just wanted to make sure that people were, we're aware of that, so that we all think about that when we're considering the versions, things that might affect the versions of the compilers and features and that kind of stuff. Does that make sense? Or
what was the issue about?
They were actually asking for 2013.
Oh, okay.
So I'd said, well, looking at the supported versions, you need at least 2017.
I see.
And Richard pointed out, well, wait a sec, there's this other doc that actually would say the answer is 2015.
Yeah.
Now, either way, 2013 isn't supported, but it means that, like, we probably don't have any testing that tests with 2015.
Right. Yeah.
Our having 10 in the matrix make sure we have 2017 testing, but not 2015 testing.
Right.
What I know is that from 2015, you have the binary compatibility. Before, this is not guaranteed. So if you could use a library compiled with VS Visual Studio Compiler 2015 in your new Visual Studio 2019 without problem. But yeah, there is a problem with 2013 because Microsoft does not assure the compatibility. This is what I know.
Okay, but that's actually a slightly different problem in that it, like this is, we could start using some new compiler language feature that's only available in 19. And then you'd no longer be able to compile, or say today, we could introduce something that used a feature that's only available in 2017, not available in 2015. And we probably, so that you would no longer be able to compile your add-ons with 2015. Because we'd use some new,
Okay.
C++ feature or something like that. So I think I just wanted to make it so that we're aware, and maybe we should think a little bit more about, and maybe we need to add some testing on 2015, or at least keep that in mind.
I'm thinking, what if the node and the add-on is compiled against different compiler versions? Like say, if the add-on is compiled with VS Code 2013, and then the node is compiled against a very newer version, like say 2017.
I think what Nicola
have...
just said was that should work as long as it's 2015 or later.
Yeah, great. Sounds.
That's right, Nicola, right?
Yeah, maybe later I can search for the Microsoft documentation where I read this, but yeah, essentially from the 2015, you can you have the binary compatibility, so you can use the library compiled in the previous version in the new version without problem. But this is not valid for the version previous of 2015. So yeah, 2000 you cannot use the library compiled with 2013 in a project compiled with 2015, for example, because yeah, you don't have the binary compatibility assured by so.
Okay, so I think we wanted to keep some time for.
Maybe it seems to work, but you will get some strange error at runtime. Yeah, this is the problem.
Okay, I think we want to keep some time to talk about the mentee candidates. So unless there's any other issues we think we really need to talk about this week, I'd suggest we close out and move into that private section.
Yeah, before I won't discuss about the NAP headers because I'm working on that, and I saw your suggestion, and yeah, I understand. Yeah, if you can go on my podcast.
That was add-on
Node API, no, Node API headers.
API headers. Okay.
Yeah, headers. So.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. So now, after your answer, I agree with you. So it's not the case to include the experimental function. And so what I need to do is to remove from the headers what is protected against the NAPI experimental. Is it right?
Yeah, I think if we just copy those over and then delete the parts that are under the experimental, we should be good.
Okay, so and then I can export the symbol using JavaScript, like JavaScript object, like I reported in the top of the document.
Right, this one.
And after the Gabriel question, yeah.
Here or a little bit lower, sorry.
Yeah, no, okay, here. So,
Okay, yeah.
So yeah, Gabriel said that we have two kind of API. One is a JavaScript API, and another is an API
Yep.
For Node. So yeah, we have some symbols that for the JavaScript API and other for Node API. So
Yep.
we can choose to export the symbols per Node API version, and for JavaScript and for Node. So if you agree with this, I can go forward, and I can complete my pull request for the next week. So
yeah, that looks
I don't
good.
know.
I like breaking them up by those two categories. I think that's definitely a good idea.
Okay.
The only thing I can see is that there's a slight typo. It's SymBOLS.
Yeah.
Okay, no problem.
Sorry, I wrote quickly. So
yeah, I know I do that too. So okay. Yeah, no, that looks good. I don't know what everybody else thinks, but
okay, for me it's good.
Okay.
So
okay, good. Any other key things that we should touch on before we move into the private section? I guess if not, I do have one last one, which is I can't make the meeting next week. I'm wondering, it sounds like Gabriel might have a harder time making some of the meetings. So I'm thinking we might want to find somebody else who can stream volunteer as, for the times I can't make it. So if you are interested in doing that, let me know and we can get you set up to be able to do that. And we'll need to figure out somebody. Actually, I don't know. Maybe Gabriel can do it next week, but it'd be good to figure out like another alternate person, I think. So I would say just send me an email if you're interested and we'll go from there.
okay.
I will say then, okay, thanks for everybody who is watching.